you read or study about the D-Day operations on June 6th of 1944, one of the things that you'll often come across are the stories of the misdrops that happened with the airborne paratroopers, where men from the 82nd and 101st, missed their drop zone because the C-47 pilots sped up or were flying too low or this, that, or the other. In reality, most of the paratroopers landed pretty close to their drop zone, but there were some who were way off. And the most far-flung group was a group of paratroopers from the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment who landed nearly 20 miles off of their intended target near a little village that is known as Graignes. So the village of Graignes is located to the south of Carentan, and if you go to a map and look at it, well, you can get an idea of just how far off these guys from the 507th were whenever they dropped on D-Day. Now, there were also some guys from the 501st who dropped in this area as well. So I'm looking out over this valley right here, and if you see that house in the distance right there, well, in that general area is where some of the men from the 507th would have landed. This whole area would have been flooded. It's kind of a marshy area anyway, but would have been flooded to try and disrupt the Allied airdrops. And once all of these guys got together, well, they made their way up to the high ground right here near this church in Graignes. So the highest ranking officer who dropped right here in this area was a gentleman by the name of Major Charles Johnston. And once they figured out exactly where they were, the decision was made to go ahead and kind of just make a stand right here. Fortunately, along with the drop, they had a heavy weapons company, so it wasn't like a bunch of guys with, just M1 carbines or something like that. They had mortars, they, had heavy machine guns. They had all of the things that they would need to basically mount a proper defense. And by the end of D+1, there were about 182 guys who had assembled right here in this area. The issue was going to be, how were they going to eat, until they could be properly relieved? And that is where the citizens of this area come into this story. What we're looking at right now is the church in the village of Graignes. So the airborne troops that had assembled in this area utilized this structure. There was an observation post that was set up in the belfry, and the townspeople, who probably would have numbered around 60 or so, met in this very church, and they had a decision to make. If they were going to give aid and food to these American paratroopers to help keep them sustained for whatever was to come, or to do something else. And this was a huge risk. A lot of people forget that D-Day and the Battle of Normandy wasn't just about the Germans versus the Americans in this sector. All throughout Normandy, there are people here. These are people's homes and their land. And if the Allies come in, and they lose and the Germans win, well, that's a huge risk to anybody who may have given them aid and comfort during that time. But the people of Graignes decided that they were going to help the Americans out. So they started doing overtime in the bakery. All the families started pulling items out of their gardens and everything like that to help these guys out.
So this is a bridge, Port de Planck. Omaha Beach essentially is that way, Utah Beach is over that way, and this was a bridge where Captain Johnson of the 507th in Graignes, the village a couple of miles behind us, sent out a patrol to this area on June the 10th, and pretty much here and just up, there's a few buildings up a couple hundred yards ahead of me, they bumped into probably a patrol from the 17th SS. Quite a large firefight around here, and during this engagement, the Americans from the 507th became aware of the 17th SS being in the area, and the 17th SS became aware of the Americans being on Graignes, which then leads to the action of the fighting for the village behind us. While we're here, I want to point out the fact that at the time in June 1944, all this area left and right was completely underwater. This bridge was like a causeway leading through this massive areas of flooding, and the villagers here made their money and had their livelihood by fishing on these these areas with their flat bottom boats to go and get fish to sell at the market. And this is a kind of a backwater of Normandy where this incredible action took place, and the bridge is now called the Bridge of the 507th, and up there further up is a building with bullet holes on it, and it's a little known battle really in the Normandy historiography these days, but this battle here for this bridge is quite a significant event in early June 1944.
Well, we've just moved up from the bridge a little bit, and Paul mentioned a building that had some battle damage from the encounter that the American patrol had with the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier, and holy smokes, this building flat got stitched up. Now, I don't know if somebody was in this house or what happened, but dang, this building flat got peppered. Unbelievable. Just battle damage everywhere. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move back up to the church now. On Sunday morning of June the 11th, things were fairly quiet in this area. So Major Johnston allowed many of these guys who were holding out here to come here to this church. Now the walls are gone now, and it's just a shell. But on that morning, you would have had men in here praying and worshiping. And in the middle of the service, a French woman ran in saying, "The Germans are coming, the Germans are coming." And closing in on this position were German elements of the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division. So standing here, you can just imagine the frenzy as these American paratroopers were jumping up out of their seat, grabbing their M1 Graignes or the carbines or whatever kit they had, and running out the nearest door to get into position. And shortly after, the German attack would have cut loose right here on this position. I've moved around to the other side of the church, and in the church cemetery you can actually still see some of the evidence from the fighting that took place here. So, for example, right here on this post, you can see a couple of spots where gunfire hit. We go over here. Again, there's some battle damage. More battle damage there. So this was a high point in Graignes. The Germans would have known that this would have been used as like an observation post. So they would have brought in the full force of their artillery on this position, and they ended up taking out the spotter in the belfry. So that blinded the Americans as far as, you know, for their mortar teams. And they also killed Major Johnston in the early parts of the attack, which took out the leadership. Here in the remains of the church, they have a plaque here that says, "In memory of the citizens of Graignes and the American soldiers who gave their lives in defense of Graignes during the period of the 6th of June to the 12th of June, 1944. And then it gives the names of the French civilians who died in this area. Some of them didn't die during this particular battle. Some of them died, honestly, in Allied air bombings later on. They were casualties that were unintended, but unfortunately, that's just one of the things that happened here in Normandy. And then we have all of the soldiers who died in the defense of Graignes. So I mentioned Major Charles Johnston, but there were many others, like Captain Bogart, Captain Sophian, Corporal Lemke, Leo Packham, Robert Miller, Harold Primo. Now, they didn't necessarily die on this hilltop right here in the vicinity of the church, but they were in the area or on the perimeter. But man, oh man, it's a heavy sacrifice that was paid for the defense of this village. Something else that I do want to mention, there's also a story from Graignes that the church had been turned into an aid station. There were a couple of medics in there and several wounded, and there's a story that the SS hauled them out and bayoneted some by a pond and marched some others off and killed them. Honestly, the history on that is a little bit hazy. For the guys who were in a part of this unit that were killed, the official paperwork says that they died probably about a mile from here. So anyway, it's a little bit, like I said, fuzzy as far as what happened to the American wounded here in the spot. There was a place that was close by where the SS definitely murdered some guys. But what we do know for sure is that there was a heroic stand made right here by a far-flung group of paratroopers on the days of the 10th, 11th, and 12th of June in 1944. And there was also a heroic group of French civilians that helped them. So if you ever get a chance to come to Normandy, come to this place.